Let's move now to KwaZulu-Natal. Several people being treated in hospital following a multiple vehicle crash on the M41 near Umhlanga, north of Durban this morning. Now, it's understood that a truck rammed into several cars, causing an over 40, yes, I said 40, vehicle pileup. Now, so far, no deaths have been reported. Let's really hope it stays that way. But the driver of the truck and his assistant have fled the scene. Our senior reporter, Dasen Thathiah, joins us for the very latest. Dasen, thank you so much for joining us. You were on scene really, really quickly. Talk to us about what you saw and what you've been able to find out about how this accident happened, given that the truck driver and his assistant have apparently fled.
Well, it took us by surprise, Sal, because I was with our colleague Nkanyiso at the time, and we were heading towards Durban, towards the court, because that's where Zandile Gumede was appearing today. And before we got there, obviously, just shortly after we'd left the office, we then stumbled across this accident. And initially, I didn't realize the scale of it, because you could just see a car that was off to the side, it was on the grass. And then as we stopped the vehicle and we decided to investigate, because it was a massive traffic jam, and we walked up, and that was when we realized that this had literally just happened within a few minutes. So it must have been around 7:30 this morning, and there were cars just strewn everywhere on the M41. It was over a few hundred meters, and it was a slight decline. The road was heading down towards the M4, so it was a few hundred meters before that. And it was nothing like we'd ever seen before. In fact, paramedics were also saying that they had not seen any type of damage or any type of pileup that looked like this in recent history. You would have seen from the visuals that there were vehicles lying on top of each other. When we got there, there were still people that were trapped inside the vehicles. But what we managed to establish during that time, when we were talking to those that were nearby, some had already started to try to crawl out of the cars, is that they said that the last thing that they'd remembered was that a truck had been coming up from behind them, going downhill, and as that happened, it's just started knocking cars out of the way from one side to the other side. It's a two-lane road that we are talking about. And this truck, this articulated truck, a side tipper, in fact, then sped past them, went around a corner, probably about 200 or 300 meters away from them, and off to the side of the road, and that's where he overturned. So there's been no sign of the driver since then. He did flee. That was the report that we got. There was someone else in the vehicle as well, and I just checked with police a short while ago, and apparently they are still trying to locate that driver. Obviously, he'll have to answer for what's happened today, explain what went wrong and how his vehicle came or got into that position where he ended up just ramming all of these cars and causing all of those injuries this morning.
Was it, do they suspect that it was a brake failure?
Well, interestingly, one of the first accounts that we were given, we did speak to some of the survivors of the accident, and one of the first accounts that we were given was that there was some kind of screeching noise as the truck was approaching. So as to whether that indicates if there was a brake failure or not, that's something that the SAPS's accident investigation unit will have to deal with. But it does sound like the driver was definitely not in control of the vehicle at that time. I want to play part of an interview as well. This is one of the survivors of that crash. When we looked at his vehicle, we just struggled to believe how he managed to get out of that Hilux. Let's listen to what he had to say to us on scene earlier.
Basically, just carnage of cars lying everywhere, and parts of vehicles just lying everywhere, and people screaming, all that kind of things. And there was a lot of people that obviously were running around trying to help whoever else. So I looked at myself first. I see I was fine. So I just grabbed whatever I needed from the van that was important, and then I started to help everybody else to try and get out of their vehicles, which was quite bad. There was a lot of people that was stuck in the vehicles and things like that. So we managed to get them out unharmed, but they were hurt quite badly, yes.
I mean, the visuals are just appalling and astonishing. We've heard about injuries. Talk to me about how many people have been injured. What is their condition? Remarkably, at this stage, let's hope it stays that way, no reports of fatalities. Am I right?
That's right, and I think that is a miracle, and that was the the best news that comes out of today is that despite what the visuals show us, it was really just people that were injured. Because you have to picture this, Sal. This was the morning, so this was at about 7:30. There were some parents that were doing the school run. I saw a father that had been taking his daughter to university at that time. There were some little children. I saw a dad carrying his little son to one of the ambulances and saying, "Can you please check him out?" because he was also in the vehicle. There was a pregnant woman that was airlifted. She was airlifted because there were concerns around whether the baby would be okay. So if you just put yourself in that position, it's something that any of us could be in at that time, and then you have a situation like this that's completely out of your control, where a big vehicle like that, a truck, just comes in and rams the vehicles out of the way. So that alone was already something that was very shocking, very difficult for people to deal with because they didn't expect it. They were in a normal traffic jam. Paramedics themselves were saying the same thing, that they had to, work out a system of looking at all of the patients. There were people everywhere, really. It was just, it was very chaotic. So they had to just find out who exactly was in the vehicles, who was injured, and each of these services had to then deal with some of these patients and transport them accordingly. So as it stands, about 22 people that were injured. Let's listen to a conversation that I had with Sean Herbst. He's from Netcare 911.
There were 6 patients that had sustained critical injuries when we arrived on scene. As you've seen from the visuals, multiple vehicles have been involved, including a truck and a couple of taxis. 6 of those patients that were involved had sustained critical injuries. We stabilized one of the patients, the most critically injured patient, which we summoned the helicopter. The helicopter then flew the patient through to a specialist medical facility for the treatment that she required.
Is there an indication at this point as to how many other patients there were?
Well, we've counted over 30 patients. A lot of the patients were transported privately before the arrival of emergency services.
What is the nature of some of the other injuries, besides the ones that were critical?
We've seen multiple fractures. We've seen suspected spinal injuries, head injuries, and just people absolutely shocked at what had happened.